Welcome back to another Reading and Correcting with me, Kindar, the Tiger Knights, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. These are where I read a chapter from one of my stories and correct it as I go. If you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch, and if you're looking to support me, that is on my Patreon. Today we are doing chapter 23 of A Series of Death. Girder Mass Hunter, Trembor said, sitting the young puma before the processing officer. Case 254 6542. The poor male had killed his neighbor when an argument got out of control, freaked out and fled. He'd been hiding among the homeless for the last 3 weeks, and Trembor was confident the male had even eaten some of that meat out of desperation. Do you have the supporting evidence? The deer on the other side of the desk asked. I didn't do it, the puma said, and earned himself a glare from her. Trevor handed her the slate. There had been witnesses. The puma had left fur at the scene, and the bull had blood on his knuckles, which he'd matched to the puma. Confirming he was the killer had been simple. It was tracking him down that had been time-consuming. Any personal opinion, R.R. Gordon-Main? She asked. This was why he handed over this quarry to her. She wasn't uncaring as some of the other officers within financial processing. An argument got out of hand. Everything I found speaks to him being scared more than anything. He didn't set out to break the law. Why didn't you just pay the tax? She asked the young male. I can't afford it, he replied meekly. There are lending agencies. He shook his head. I already owe too much. It's why I had to move back in with my mom. I need to save as much money as I could to repay them. Trevor shook his head sadly. Today's young predator had the highest rate of food-related death. Hadn't Marlowe pointed out something on the kiosk? He shut down the thought. He wasn't thinking about the wolf. Could she pay it for you? The officer asked, tone still neutral. I'm not putting that on her, he exclaimed, and shrunk in on himself as people at the other desk looked in their direction. I'm of hunting age. I'm supposed to be able to provide meat, not have to. He trailed off, blinking to keep the tears from forming. Does your mother know you're okay? She asked, her tone warming. The puma shook his head. I called her to let her know I'd found him, Tremor said. The young man looked scared. Should I expect her? No, I explained he had to be processed before anything else. I told her you'd called her once that was done. She studied the puma. What's left of the body? It's in good condition, Trembler answered. It was put in a freezer within a couple of hours of dying. It's been 3 weeks, so there could be freezer burn, but I'd eat it if it was my kill. She inserted the slate, read and typed. Would your mother be willing to pay the tax? She asked. It is the simplest thing all around. I can't ask her to do that, the puma whispered. She reached across the desk to place it and placed a hand on the puma's. Girder, she's your mother. I'm sure she'd rather pay than see you do time among the work crews. The puma pulled his hand away. He's my kill, he said defiantly. My responsibility. I'll do the time. She looked at Trembler and mouthed a cubs. He shrugged. He'd been the same at that age, determined to prove he didn't need anyone's help, even once involved with Gorek. So, yeah, he had been just as stupid as the puma. Everything is in order, R.I. Goldenmane. I will have him processed by the end of the day. She handed him the slate back with the confirmation so he could update his files. Thank you for your good work. He put it away and left, feeling hollow. On the trail of Gorek came thoughts of Marlot again, and this time the wolf wouldn't just leave. He wanted to call him, to let him know he'd cleared another body out of the freezer. He wanted to celebrate with the wolf. Why did he still miss him after all these weeks? Miss his touch, his scent. The male was an abuser. Tremper wanted nothing to do with him. He looked at the passenger seat as he started his car and imagined the wolf sitting there, his hand on Tremor's thigh. He shook the memory away. He'd gotten over Gorek, he'd get over Marlot. And we got this again. He sat the rust-colored wolf in the chair harder than he had to, and the officer, angry-looking boar, glutted the lion, then the wolf. Baldy and fire pelt, Tremper said, handing over the slate. Case 254-6555. At her desk, the deer glanced in their direction as she spoke to with the ocelot standing by the elk, seated at her desk. Seated before her. He could have waited for her to be available, but this wolf didn't merit her understanding. His tax his tax evasion hadn't been accidental. He'd done everything he could to cover his tracks, and when caught, he'd made Marlot work for the capture. They both had bruises and cuts to prove that. The boar inserted the slate, started typing, his eyes moving over the screen. After a minute, Trevor cleared his voice and cleared his throat. And the boar looked at him, annoyed. He typed again, took the slate out. Here, you can go. Trevor stepped away. The boar added, good work. He made his way through the crowd in the lobby, having to fight the urge to growl as he was bumped into and shoved. The next time he came here, he'd check how busy they were first. See, this is interesting. Like this one, or maybe I fixed this one. Nah. Trevor read the file again. The forensic report on the Arlen Shines scene had come back 3 days ago, but he'd asked the officer to go over the report because the first one had amounted to no usable evidence. And while he knew that wasn't an impossibility, he was unlikely enough. He wanted them to make sure they missed nothing. Was he dealing with a reptile again? Tried to remember which body that it had been. A cheetah, he thought. Spotted fur. Remembering her, he remembered being shot, and the memory of the pain in his shoulder returned. The male, he couldn't remember the name, who'd killed her, had almost gotten away with it because reptiles didn't shed the way furred species did, and he and Marlowe just couldn't understand why there had been nothing on at the scene. Cursor, there you are. Marlowe had made the bastard pay for hurting him. The smile fell as the context of what had happened changed. Of course, Marlowe had killed the reptile. He'd hurt Trembor. He'd hurt Marlowe's possession. Gurk had done nothing that extreme, but there had been a few beating in clubs where he'd paraded Trembor, where males had thought that meant Trembor was being offered to them. Gorek didn't share. With a curse, he shook the memory away and focused on the case. The Coyote didn't have enemies, unless he counted the angry females he dated or the few work-related grudges. He'd checked those at people's alibis. The one thing of note was that he'd requested a replacement ID, which Trembor had expected since Marlowe had been at the house to hand over the lost one. Of course, it would be the case. Trembor just couldn't clear that. It would be the case Trembor couldn't clear. Of course, it would be the case Trembor just couldn't clear that the wolf. Yeah. Of course, it would be the case. The case Trembor just couldn't clear that the wolf had shown up to. Enforcers had questioned the neighbors, but no one had seen anything. Trembor didn't enjoy thinking about any case like that, but this might be one that the one body in RI never cleared, that got passed on to his replacement once he retired, and so on until the system forgot who the body had been. Marlot had inherited one of those when he took over his territory. Trembor had avoided having one. He sighed. Marlot again. He took his pad off the charging plate and felt unreasonably proud at having remembered without having Marlot's. Whoa, that's a lot of remembered. Well, two of them. He took his pad off the charging plate and felt unreasonably proud at having remembered without Marlot's memory nagging at him about it. There we go, that works. Hey, Uncle Trembor. Alex greeted him. Hey, Alex, how are you doing? Don't you mean how my dad's doing? My sense that strong? He asked with a chuckle. He's the one in trouble right now, his nephew answered, and Trember heard the shrug in his voice. How is my brother doing? That smells okay. He's on edge, and he's spending a lot of time with females. Izzy hasn't caught the scent of his stress, I think. Dad took us to Grand Central yesterday after class. After classes. Females were better than gambling, Trevor thought. How's the amusement park? It's okay, Alex answered in a clear, I'm not a cub anymore tone. Izzy had fun. Dad seemed distracted. Anyone? Trevor looked for how to ask the question without making Heralex too suspicious. Unusual. Come by? No, just a female he brings over. He's quiet about it, waits until Izzy's in bed to do anything. Meaning Heralex heard what his father and the females got up to. Meaning Alex heard what his father and the females got up to. I don't see a comma below. How to, yeah, I'm not changing that. That couldn't be easy on someone his age with the hormones still raging. Okay, thanks. Keep me informed if your father behaves oddly. Are you okay, Uncle? Alex asked before Trember could disconnect the call. I'm fine, he answered. Right. His nephew replied sarcastically, because you always call in the middle of a workday when you're fine. He paused. It's him again, isn't it? Marlot had gone back to being him, for which Trember was grateful. He keeps sneaking into my mind, Trember sighed. He's particularly stubborn today. You'll get over him. You're stronger than he is. Trember smiled. Thanks. I'll see you at the next family dinner. He disconnected. Was he stronger than Marlot? If he was, why did he still yearn for the wolf? For his touch, the smell of his body against him, to hold and comfort the wolf. Because you're addicted? He snarled. You know that. Gork had done the same, gotten him used to his tender touch so he could control him with it. It was one way abusers got their claws into victims. He should have seen it happening. He knew about it, had fallen for it once, so he should have realized it was what Marlot was doing. Maybe he wasn't as strong as Heralex thought. Sound from the other side of the door erupted. A lot of officers moving at once. He opened the door. Any distraction was welcome right now, and everyone in the precinct was moving out. What happened? He asked a passing officer, but before the female could answer him, his pad buzzed. All right, Golden Mane, he answered, having heard her giving her a shrug as she headed for the exit. Trember, the dispatch officer said. A call just came in. There's a body in your territory. Thanks. Pad me the details, and I'll be there. At least he wouldn't be stuck at home at the precinct with his thoughts. Marlot would love that, outing him in the silence. And that concludes chapter 23 of A Series of Death. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next chapter is going to be up, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to read the book as well as the others in the series, they are available at all major e-retailers. If you want a different way to support me, that is on my Patreon, where you can also get access to basically everything else I've written. If you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. The links are in the notes, and with that, I shall wish you a good day.